Okay, let's dive into something that really shapes all our connections, often without us even realizing it. I'm talking about attachment styles.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, whether you're someone who often needs a bit more reassurance in relationships, or maybe you really value your independence, perhaps above everything else.
Or somewhere in that spectrum between.
Yeah, exactly. It often seems to boil down to those really early lessons we learned about how to connect with others and, crucially, how to feel safe doing it.
And what's really striking is how these patterns, often set, way back in our childhoods, keep influencing our adult lives, how we react emotionally, who we're drawn to, that basic sense of security or lack of it.
Right. So for this deep dive, what we really want to do is break down the 4 main attachment styles that researchers talk about. We'll look into where these patterns might come from.
Their origins. Yeah.
And maybe most importantly, talk about how we can potentially shift towards healthier ways of connecting with people.
That's the hopeful part, the growth aspect.
Definitely. And a lot of the ideas we're exploring today were touched upon in a really interesting conversation on the Inside the Mind with Chanrvi podcast. Sara and Alex were hosting that one.
Yes. Good discussion there. It brings up the question, though, where did this whole idea, this framework of attachment styles actually come from? It wasn't just pulled out of thin air, right?
Not at all. You're spot on. The real groundwork for attachment theory was laid by the psychologist John Bowlby. His initial insights were then really fleshed out and tested more by Mary Ainsworth.
Bowlby and Ainsworth, key figures.
Totally. Their research basically showed how those first bonds we form, usually with parents or primary caregivers, act like a kind of blueprint. They set the stage for how we approach intimacy and connection later in life.
So those early interactions, they're essentially teaching us what to expect. Like, can I count on this person? Will they be there when I need them? Is closeness safe? Bowlby saw this with kids in separation.
Right, that anxiety.
And Ainsworth's strange situation studies, well, they really demonstrated these different attachment behaviors quite clearly in a lab setting. It wasn't just theory anymore.
Yeah, think about it like this, just a simple everyday thing.
Yeah.
Say you send a text message to someone you're, maybe starting to date, and hours pass. Silence.
Oh, yeah. The dreaded text delay.
Right. Now, depending on your attachment style, your internal reaction could be wildly different. Someone secure might just think, they're busy. Simple as that.
But for someone with a more insecure style, well, that silence can feel really loud. It can kick off a whole internal storm.
Exactly. Which leads to that idea you mentioned earlier, consistent caregiving.
Yes, that seems absolutely fundamental. When love and attention feel reliable and predictable in childhood, you tend to build that secure base. But if it's inconsistent, if love feels uncertain, or maybe it's just not there reliably,
then what happens?
Well, that can lead to what some call hypervigilance in adult relationships. You're constantly scanning for signs of trouble, signs of rejection, maybe reading negativity into things that aren't actually negative.
Because your early experience kind of trained you to expect instability.
Precisely. Your system is primed for it.
Okay, let's break down those 4 styles that Sara and Alex talked about. First one, secure attachment. What does that actually look like?
So secure attachment, generally speaking, these are folks who feel pretty comfortable with intimacy, with getting close, but they're also okay with independence, their own and their partners.
These sound balanced.
Yeah, they tend to trust others, communicate their needs relatively openly, and relationships for them generally feel like a safe harbor, not a source of constant stress.
And how does that usually develop? You mentioned consistent care.
Typically, yeah.
Yeah.
It often comes from having caregivers who were, good enough, not perfect, nobody's perfect, but consistently available emotionally, responsive to needs. They provided that feeling of safety.
I remember Alex on the podcast called them healthy emotional unicorns.
Huh. That's memorable. It paints a picture, doesn't it?
It really does. Okay, so moving on from the unicorns. Anxious attachment. What are the hallmarks there?
Anxious attachment often involves a real craving for closeness, like a deep need to merge almost.
Yeah.
But it's coupled with this intense fear of abandonment or rejection.
So wanting connection, but terrified of losing it.
Exactly. They might overthink things in the relationship, constantly seek reassurance, maybe become hyper-aware of any tiny shift in their partner's mood or behavior. What's interesting and kind of sad is that this constant need for reassurance can sometimes feel overwhelming to a partner.
And actually push them away.
Potentially, yes. It can sometimes create a self-fulfilling prophecy, unfortunately.
And Sarah, on that podcast, linked this back to that inconsistent caregiving again. Like, the child never really knew if their needs would be met, so they grew up feeling anxious about connection.
Yes, that unpredictability is key. If attention and affection felt conditional or unreliable, you learn that you have to work really hard, maybe even be hypervigilant, to keep that connection secure.
Alex had that phrase for it, something like, they love hard, but fear harder. Really captures that tension.
It does. That fear can really drive behavior.
Okay, third style, avoidant attachment. This sounds like the opposite, almost.
In some ways, yeah. Avoidant attachment often shows up as an emotional distancing, a tendency to pull back when things get too close or too intimate.
Like they shut down.
Sort of. Closeness can feel suffocating, maybe, or just uncomfortable. They often really value their independence, their self-sufficiency. Vulnerability can be quite difficult for them.
And this value on independence, you think it's learned?
Often, yes.
Yeah.
They can stem from a learned distrust, perhaps. A sense that relying on others emotionally isn't safe or dependable based on early experiences. So they withdraw as a way to protect themselves, maybe preemptively.
Alex made that connection to being ghosted, when someone just vanishes from a relationship. He suggested that could sometimes be rooted in avoidant patterns.
Could be one manifestation, yeah. A way of avoiding the discomfort of a direct ending or deeper intimacy.
And Sarah suggested this often comes from childhoods where, again, emotional needs maybe weren't seen or met consistently. So detachment becomes a coping strategy.
Almost like they learned, okay, relying on others doesn't work, or it hurts. I'll just rely on myself. But that comes at the cost of deep connection.
Right. Okay. And the last one, fearful avoidant, also called disorganized sometimes. This sounds complicated.
It is quite complex, yeah. Fearful avoidant is marked by this internal conflict. There's a real desire for closeness. They want connection, but they're also deeply afraid of it.
So push-pull, come here. No, wait, go away.
Exactly that dynamic. It can be very confusing for them and for their partners. It's they crave intimacy, but simultaneously anticipate being hurt by it.
And Sarah linked this one often to more difficult early experiences, maybe trauma or really chaotic home environments.
Frequently, yes. Situations where the caregiver, the person who should be a source of safety, might have also been a source of fear or unpredictability.
So love feels dangerous, but being alone also feels dangerous.
That's a good way to put it. It creates this deep ambivalence about connection. There isn't a clear, consistent strategy for relating. They oscillate between wanting closeness and pushing it away.
Wow. Okay, so we've got these 4 styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, fearful avoidant. It really makes you pause and think. Why does understanding all this stuff actually matter day to day?
Well, I think the power in understanding this is that it shifts things. It moves you from just sort of reacting blindly to your relationship patterns.
To actually seeing them.
Exactly. And potentially shaping them consciously. It's not just about digging up the past. It's very much about building healthier connections moving forward.
I like how Alex put it, like finding a secret manual for yourself. Understanding why you love the way you do, or why you fight the way you do, or why you always seem to be the one chasing or the one running away.
That
moment. Yeah. That realization, like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not inherently clingy. Maybe I just learned really early on that love feels unstable unless I hold on tight.
Yeah.
That awareness itself feels huge.
It is huge. That self-awareness is, without doubt, the first and most critical step. Once you can name the pattern, identify the triggers, understand the underlying needs and fears, you gain agency.
You can see it coming almost.
You start to understand why certain things push your button so intensely.
Okay, so awareness is step 1, but as someone listening recognizes, say, anxious or avoidant patterns in themselves, what comes next? Awareness is great, but it doesn't magically fix things.
Absolutely not. Awareness is the foundation. The next really important step is learning to self-soothe effectively, meaning developing ways to manage your own difficult emotions. Anxiety, fear, overwhelm from the inside out, rather than always needing external validation or needing your partner to fix it for you immediately.
So building your own emotional regulation toolkit, basically.
That's a perfect way to put it. Finding healthy ways to calm your own nervous system when those attachment fears get activated.
Makes sense. What else?
Then there's communication. Practicing secure communication. This means learning to express your needs, your feelings, your boundaries openly and honestly, even when it feels scary or vulnerable.
Instead of hinting or withdrawing or maybe lashing out.
Precisely. Moving towards more direct, less defensive ways of talking about what's going on for you in the relationship.
And I remember Sara and Alex also really stressed the importance of support systems in all this.
Oh, absolutely crucial. Therapy, especially with someone knowledgeable about attachment, can be incredibly helpful for unpacking these patterns and practicing new ways of relating.
And other things too.
Definitely. Things like journaling can help you understand your own thoughts and feelings better. And really importantly, cultivating friendships with people who are emotionally safe and reliable. That can provide corrective emotional experiences. It shows you that healthy connection is possible.
It sounds like a process, though, not an overnight fix.
Oh, absolutely. It's a journey. Healing attachment wounds, shifting these deep patterns, it takes time. And it takes a lot of self-compassion.
Yeah, being kind to yourself through it.
Exactly. Like Sara said on their podcast, remember, you're not broken. You're healing. It's about progress, not perfection. Acknowledge the steps you take.
Okay, so let's just quickly wrap up what we've covered. We took a deep dive into attachment styles, what they are, the 4 main types: secure, anxious, avoidant, and that complex, fearful avoidant.
We looked at how they often develop from early experiences.
Right, and why understanding these patterns is so key for our relationships. And then we touched on those first steps towards growth: awareness, self-soothing, secure communication.
And leveraging support systems. Ultimately, it's about realizing how much those early experiences shape us, but also, really importantly, holding on to the fact that we can change. We can learn and grow towards more security.
Absolutely. And hey, if this conversation resonated with you, if it shed some light on your own patterns or maybe helped you understand someone else a bit better, please do think about sharing this deep dive.
Spread the understanding, yeah.
And if you want to explore these kinds of topics even further, human behavior, healing, growth, we definitely recommend checking out the source we mentioned, the Inside the Mind with Chanrvi podcast, and also the Chanrvi YouTube channel. Lots of great insights there from Sara and Alex.
Good resources for sure.
Well, thanks so much for joining us for this exploration today.
It's been really valuable to discuss.
And just a final thought to leave you with. Your past may have shaped you, but it absolutely doesn't have to define your future.